They won't teach you this in school, and your favorite dating coach won't say it this way. But if you've ever looked into a woman's eyes and wondered, what really moves her? What really makes her stay, lean in, soften? Remember, it's not the flash, it's not the flex, it's not even the words. It's the man behind the mask, his stillness, his depth, his restraint, his mystery, his purpose, the way he holds his silence like a sword. Because women have 1,000 defenses for the loud man, but almost none for the man who sees her and doesn't flinch. These aren't tricks, they're truths. And once you understand them, you'll stop performing and start becoming. Let's begin. 1. Confidence that doesn't ask for permission. There was this guy I knew back when I worked a job I hated. Long hours, gray walls, fluorescent lights. We all wore the same tired expressions except him. Jake. He wasn't louder than anyone. He wasn't the boss. He didn't throw around ego or flex status. But when he walked into a room, people moved. Not because he demanded space, but because he owned it. Quietly, fully. He never waited to be told what he could do. He never asked, "Can I speak?" or "Is this okay?" He just acted, respectfully but without hesitation. That kind of confidence. The kind that doesn't check itself in the mirror before walking out. It shook people, especially women. I remember watching him at a bar once. A woman tried testing him, poking at his job, his watch, his age. He smiled like he knew what she was doing and didn't care. He didn't defend himself, didn't qualify anything. Just leaned back, looked her in the eyes and said, "You're fun." That was it. And just like that, the dynamic flipped. She started chasing. See, most men mistake confidence for volume. They think it's dominance or approval-seeking disguised as charm. But real confidence, the kind that doesn't ask for permission, it's still. It doesn't beg to be understood. It assumes its own value, not from arrogance, but from self-possession. I've seen it in a man with scars on his hands who didn't need to explain them. In a father who raised his voice only once and never needed to again. In a guy who said no to a beautiful woman, not to play games, but because he had standards. You don't need to perform. You don't need to convince. Just be the man who already knows who he is. And that's the kind of confidence that doesn't just attract women. It unsettles them in the best way. 2. Understand women without making her explain everything. It's wild how many men think they need to interrogate a woman to understand her. What's wrong? Tell me what you want. Why didn't you say something? But here's the truth. If a man needs everything spelled out, he's not listening. He's just waiting for instructions. And deep down, she feels it. She doesn't want to teach you how to read her. She wants you to already know, or at the very least, care enough to figure it out without a checklist. There was a guy I used to train with at the gym. Solid guy. Respectful, funny, reliable. But when it came to women, he couldn't keep one around longer than 3 months. I asked him why he thought that was. He said, "I always ask what they need. I'm always available. I check in constantly." That was the problem. He was trying to manage emotions like a to-do list. Now contrast that with Marcus, a quiet, grounded type, not the smoothest talker. But one night, his girl came into the restaurant we were at. She looked off, not crying, not cold, just distant. Most guys wouldn't have noticed. Marcus didn't ask questions, didn't panic. He just stood up, held out his hand and said, "Let's walk." They disappeared for 20 minutes. When he came back, she was leaning into him like he was the only man left on earth. He didn't wait for her to explain. He felt the shift. That's the difference. Understanding women isn't about solving her like a puzzle. It's about reading energy, her eyes, her silence, the way she says, "I'm fine," without blinking. It's about paying attention to what's not being said. You don't need to decode every signal. You just need to be present enough to notice. And sometimes, it's not about saying the perfect words. It's about making her feel like you're tuned in without her having to cry for it. That kind of awareness? That's rare. And it hits different. Women don't want to lead you to their emotions like a teacher with a whiteboard. They want to feel you get it, without having to bleed for it. 3. Masculine silence. There's a kind of silence that makes people nervous. And then, there's the kind that makes them lean in. Not the silence of awkwardness, but the silence of a man who isn't rushing to fill the air because he's not afraid of it. That's masculine silence. It's rare, and it's powerful. I remember sitting at a family dinner once, one of those loud, messy, everyone talking over each other affairs. My uncle, a retired military guy, sat quietly, sipping his drink, listening more than he spoke. When he finally did say something, the whole table hushed like someone hit pause. He had that stillness, that weight in his silence, like he was holding more in his quiet than anyone else had in their noise. That's what women feel when they sit across from a man who doesn't fidget, doesn't ramble, doesn't over-explain. Just calm, steady, unbothered by silence. It makes her wonder what's going on inside, not because you're playing games, but because your energy doesn't need to chase. I knew a woman once who told me, "I've never met a man who could just sit with me and not try to fix me or distract me or impress me." She wasn't asking for advice. She wasn't even asking for comfort. She was asking for a man to just be still with her, fully present, fully grounded, without breaking the silence just to escape intimacy. Most men can't do that. They joke too fast. They talk too much. They crack under the pressure of just being. But masculine silence, it says, "I'm not insecure about empty space. I don't need to prove anything right now. You're safe here, and I'm not going anywhere." That silence carries more than words ever could. It tells her you're not uncomfortable with her presence. More importantly, you're not uncomfortable with your own. Because when you're rooted in yourself, silence becomes strength, not absence. So let her talk, let her unravel, let her sit in your presence and feel the weight of it. Say less, mean more. 4. Deep eye contact that doesn't flinch. There's something about a man who holds eye contact that tells the truth without needing to say anything. Not aggressive, not creepy, just anchored, present, alive behind the eyes. I was once in a conversation with a woman who asked me, "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" I said, "Like what?" She said, "Like you see more than I'm saying." That's when I realized something. Most men break eye contact the moment it gets real. When she says something vulnerable, they glance away. When they feel exposed, they blink, shift, pretend they saw something interesting across the room. But the ones who don't flinch, who stay there, in it, holding space without trying to fix or escape, that's the kind of eye contact that cuts through armor. It's not about staring contests. It's not about power plays. It's about being so rooted in your presence that you're not afraid of being seen. And you're not afraid to see her either. I once watched a man at a networking event, sharp dresser, soft-spoken. But when he locked eyes with someone, it was like the room disappeared. He didn't dart around. He didn't scan for someone more important. He just looked fully. And when he shook your hand, it felt like he meant it. I asked him later what his trick was. He said, "I just look people in the eyes until they tell the truth, whether with words or silence." You want to connect with a woman? Don't look at her like you're hoping she'll like you. Look at her like she already has your attention, and now you're just watching what she does with it. She'll feel it, that steadiness, that quiet challenge. It tells her you're not looking for a role to play. you're already playing yours. And when you can hold that gaze, not to intimidate, not to seduce, but just to be there, you stop being forgettable. Because the truth is, eyes don't lie. And when yours speak with calm intensity, she won't forget what they said, even if you never say a word. 5. Mystery in thought, speech, and action. Not a locked room, but a meaningful maze. Mystery isn't about being unreadable. It's about being unrushed to explain. There's a difference. See, most men hear the word mystery, and they go full shadow mode. Stop talking, act cold, play hard to get. But that's not mystery. That's avoidance in a leather jacket. Real mystery is presence without predictability. It's depth without over-disclosure. There was this girl I dated years ago. Smart, sharp, knew how to see through people. The kind that makes most men nervous because she asks the kind of questions that strip away your surface. But one day, mid-conversation, she just said, "You know, I can't quite figure you out." And I love that. It wasn't because I was hiding, I was sharing. But not all at once. Each story I told had pauses. Each answer left space. She leaned in, not because I was playing games, but because I gave her room to explore. Most guys either overshare to force closeness or say nothing and hope it makes them look stoic. But women don't fall for locked vaults. They fall for gardens with hidden paths, places where they feel something waits to be discovered, not just kept secret. I once worked with a guy who always seemed like there was more to him. Not dramatic, just layered. You'd catch a moment, a look in his eye when someone mentioned grief, a quiet pause when a certain song played. And when you asked, he'd give you just enough to stir curiosity. Never too much, never too little. That's what women remember. A man who isn't afraid to share, but makes his story feel earned. A man who speaks not to impress, but to connect, slowly, deliberately. The kind of man who says something honest, then lets it linger. Who tells a story, but leaves the ending unspoken. Not to manipulate, but because not everything needs to be handed over. Mystery isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being worth getting to know. So don't be a wall, but don't be a window either. Be a maze. One with light, shadow, depth, and silence. One that invites her in, not to solve you, but to experience you, piece by piece. 6. A man with purpose, not just raw ambition. Ambition is loud. Purpose doesn't need to shout. I once met a guy at a mutual friend's backyard BBQ, early 30s, drove a modest car. Didn't mention what he did for a living until someone asked. Turns out he owned 2 businesses. The crazy part? He barely talked about them. What he did talk about was the young men he mentored, the shelter he helped fund on the side, the reason he wakes up at 5 a.m. every day, not to grind, but to reflect, to journal, to center himself. Most guys talk about the hustle. He talked about why it mattered. You see, raw ambition impresses at first glance. It looks like confidence. It sounds like drive. But without direction, ambition becomes noise, loud, anxious, exhausting. Purpose, though? That's something else. It's steady. It's rooted. It's felt. I remember a girl once told me about her ex, a motivated guy. Gym at 6. Trading crypto by 8. Always chasing, always building. But she said something that stuck with me. He was always running towards something, and I never felt like it had anything to do with me. That's the difference. A man with ambition wants to win. A man with purpose wants to mean something. I knew a carpenter once. Built furniture by hand, lived simple. Didn't care about followers, didn't care about trending. But the way he talked about his craft, the care, the intention, the ethics, it gave his work a kind of spiritual weight. Women were drawn to him, not because he was flashy, but because he radiated meaning. Women don't just want a man who's going somewhere. They want a man who knows why he's going there. And when she asks you, "What are you building?" she's not just talking about your career. She's asking if your life is pointed at something deeper than success. Purpose is quiet, but it makes everything you do carry more weight. So be ambitious, but build it on something that matters, something unmoved by applause. Because purpose is what makes a man unforgettable, even in silence. 7. Her hidden yearning to be led, not controlled. She won't say it out loud, not in today's world, where independence is currency and submission is misunderstood. But deep down, in the quiet corners of her feminine nature, most women crave something they rarely speak of: to be led. Not controlled, not dominated, led. There's a massive difference, and most men don't know it, so they either go soft and passive, or swing too far into macho control. I once watched a couple argue in a restaurant. He was barking orders, telling her how to sit, what to eat, checking her phone like he owned her. That wasn't leadership. That was insecurity dressed up in alpha cosplay. She didn't look protected. She looked cornered. But then there's the other side. The guy who says, "Whatever you want, babe," for every decision. Can't lead a conversation, let alone a relationship. He thinks he's being supportive. She just sees a man afraid to take the wheel. Real leadership doesn't force. It guides. I remember a road trip I took years ago with someone I loved deeply. We were lost in a new city, tired, hungry, tempers flaring. She started panicking, pulling up 5 different restaurant options, second-guessing herself with every suggestion. I gently took the phone, looked her in the eyes, and said, "You've had a long day. I got this. Trust me." We went. We ate. We laughed again. Later that night, she whispered, "Thank you for taking the lead when I couldn't." That's when it clicked. Women don't want a tyrant. They want to rest in the presence of a man who knows where he's going and isn't shaken by a little chaos. She'll challenge you, not because she wants control, but because she wants to feel your center, to know you won't collapse the second she pushes, that you can carry both your direction and her emotion without losing yourself. When a woman feels like she has to lead everything, plan every move, fix every problem, pull the emotional weight, she burns out. But when she feels like she can lean back and trust your direction, she softens. Not because she's weak, but because she finally feels safe. So don't control her. Lead her, by example, by integrity, by action. Not with force, but with certainty. And in that certainty, she'll find the freedom she didn't even know she was waiting for. 8. Say what you mean, but say it like it matters. Better to trip with the feet than with the tongue. Zeno of Citium. Words are cheap until they aren't. Most men speak either too much or not enough. They ramble to fill space, or they go silent, thinking silence alone makes them deep. But the truth, what sets a man apart isn't how much he talks, it's how intentionally he speaks. I once knew a guy, real, likable, funny, knew how to hold a room, but his words, they had no spine. He'd say things like, "Let's meet up sometime," or "Yeah, I'll be there," and never show. He didn't lie, but he didn't follow through either. And the women he dated, they always ended up saying the same thing. "I just didn't know where I stood with him." Then there was this other man, quiet, well-read, not flashy. He didn't speak often, but when he did, people listened. Not because his voice was loud, but because his words had weight. He told a woman once, "I want to build something real with you. Not in a rush, but not in confusion either." She paused, blinked, said no one had ever put it that way. That's the difference. When a man speaks with clarity and conviction, not to impress, not to manipulate, but because he means what he says and says it clean, it hits. Women are intuitive. They don't just hear what you say, They feel how you say it, your tone, your posture, the stillness behind your words. If you speak casually about things that matter, she won't take you seriously. If you joke your way through emotion, she'll feel it, and she'll pull back. But when you speak like your words are a reflection of your values, she leans in. Because now you're not just talking, you're revealing something real. So say what you mean. If you like her, say it. If something bothers you, voice it. But don't be reckless. Don't speak to win or to wound. Speak like it matters, like your word is a mirror of your soul. And if you ever wonder what to say what's true. Then say it with stillness. Say it with care. Say it like a man who understands that some words should never be taken back, so he never throws them lightly. 9. The power of detachment. Quote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Epictetus. There's a man I met once after a breakup. Not mine, his. He'd been with her for almost 4 years, loved her, built a life with her, thought she'd be the one. And then she left. No drama, no betrayal. Just that slow drift that sometimes happens when two people stop meeting each other in the middle. But what struck me wasn't that he was hurting. That's expected. What struck me was how he carried the hurt, calm, still, unattached. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't chasing closure. He wasn't spiraling. He simply said, "I gave what I had. It didn't last. I let it go." That's detachment, not indifference, not coldness, not emotional shutdown. Detachment is loving deeply, acting fully, showing up completely, and still being willing to walk away if your peace is compromised. And let me tell you something. Women feel this energy. Not because you're threatening to leave, but because your presence doesn't come with desperation. You're there because you choose to be, not because you need to be. I've seen men lose themselves over a woman not texting back, checking their phones every 5 minutes, overthinking a one-word reply. And every second of that behavior bleeds neediness. But the man who can say, "I care, but I'm not chasing," the one who shows affection without attachment to outcome, that man, he becomes a storm she can't control, and yet wants to stand in. I remember a woman once told me, "The moment I knew I wanted him was when he didn't try to convince me." He let her choose. And in that space, she realized his presence was a gift, not a trap. That's the paradox. The more willing you are to let go, the more power you hold. Not because you don't feel, but because you've mastered the line between care and clinging, between devotion and dependence. So love her. Show up fully. Be there when it's real. But always hold your peace like a sacred thing. Because a man who won't abandon himself, not even for love, that's the kind of man she can't forget. You don't need to be loud to be respected. You don't need to chase to be wanted. And you don't need to give it all away to be felt. She'll remember your silence if it holds weight. She'll remember your eyes if they hold truth. And she'll remember you if you become the man who doesn't just react, but leads, holds, and lets go, all without losing himself. If this spoke to something in you, subscribe. Not for content, but for the conversations that make men sharper, quieter, deeper. You're not alone in this.